We have here with us today, Tape Noise Podcast, Ross Hogarth, producer, engineer, extraordinaire, awesome guy. Welcome to our podcast. How's it going?
Thanks, Grant. Good, man. Going good.
So you're busy, I see, working with Edgar Winter and Joe Bonamassa and Billy Gibbons and all that. I see you're real active on Instagram and all that. How's that project going?
Well, this is a project called Brother Johnny. And it's a project honoring Edgar Winter's brother, Johnny Winter, who passed away a few years ago. I think 4, maybe more. I don't. It's but 4 or 5 years ago, Johnny passed, and Johnny was one of the most iconic blues rock guitar players, kind of in the history of the last, basically the history of recorded music. Coming out of the 60s and playing at Woodstock. And then, his brother Edgar, which is an interesting, they're both albinos, and they're 3 years apart. Johnny was the older brother. Edgar was the multi-instrumentalist growing up that played piano, drums, guitar, sax. Johnny was strictly a guitar player. And, so Johnny's known iconically around the world as, the blues guitar player, and he produced some of Muddy Waters' most important records, like Hard Again with Manish Boy and stuff. And at the same time, though, Edgar, as the little brother, Johnny brought him along, and Edgar probably be teaching like school in Texas as a music teacher or something if it wasn't for Johnny grabbing him, saying, "Come on, little brother," and putting him on the stage at Woodstock and playing in front of 300,000 people and changing Edgar's life. And then Edgar went on and had a #1 single 3 years later with Frankenstein with the Edgar Winter Group. Johnny never had #1 singles. It was interesting, but in a lot of areas, Johnny's iconic and better known. And, people like Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton and all these guitar players have always looked up to Johnny. So when Johnny passed away, Edgar decided that he needed to make a record to honor his brother. So it's called Brother Johnny, and it's songs that either Johnny would play or wrote, or like yesterday we were in the studio doing Mojo, which is a Muddy Waters, staple of his set. We had the blues guy come in from Mississippi, who is one of the last remaining blues guys from the Chicago blues scene, a guy named Bobby Rush, who's in his late 80s. And he's just an amazing human, and he's part of the whole thing with James Cotton, part of that whole world with Bo Diddley, James Cotton, Howlin' Wolf, Muddy Waters. He's the last remaining guy. He was there before Buddy Guy. He's older than Buddy by a few years. And so we did Mojo with him yesterday, playing and singing harp. And so this record's a special guest bucket list record that I'm co-producing, engineering, and I'll mix for and with Edgar. Edgar will sing most of the songs, but like if there's a song that someone just sings his ass off on it and it's better, he won't even bother. So we've already had Billy Gibbons and Joe Bonamassa and Steve Lukather and Bobby Rush, and we're getting we'll have Warren and Derek and Joe Walsh and Kenny Wayne Shepherd, and looking to get Jeff Beck and Doyle and Eric Clapton. And it's the bucket list record for me. There are a lot of Larry Carlton, Robin Ford. And so it's not just a blues record. It's like Johnny was a rocker, still alive and well, rock and roll hoochie coo, Rick Derringer. So it's a lot of fun, but it's going to take a while. It's not one of those records that we're going to make in like 5 weeks or 6, because I got to schedule all these guys coming in who are on the road and all.
Man, I'm looking forward to that, because that's going to be, sounds like that's going to be a great record.
It's very cool. It's already really cool. Bonamassa just killed Slade on Self-Destructive Blues. And
that guy's amazing.
Yeah. And what a great guy too.
Yeah. I met him briefly. I was working in a music store in Decatur, Alabama, not far out of Muscle Shoals, about an hour away. And he came in, he was playing in Huntsville, Alabama. I had no idea who he was. And he was just checking out. He just apparently likes to go check out old mom and pop music stores wherever he's at. And he bought strings, and people were like, yo, dude, Joe Bonamassa was here. It's like, Joe Bona who? And they're like, get on YouTube now. I'm like, oh my God, that guy is amazing. But yeah, he was super nice, just brief interaction with him. But
yeah, he loves putzing around and looking and trying to find like great old gear in places. So well, yeah, that's one of the most recent. That's going to be an ongoing project. But one of the other records that one of the other projects I'm really proud of, that these guys are doing great, and we'll get they're moving forward on new music besides touring all over the place. Is a band called Bishop Gunn.
Yeah, those guys recorded here, and I saw where you did the mix on that.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one thing I actually wanted to ask you about. I was down there while they were recording. The band had invited me like a year and a half ago, or whenever they were tracking at the old 3614 Jackson Highway, the original Muscle Shoals sound. They were the first band, I think, to officially record there after they got it renovated. And that was my first interview for this podcast. And they just invited me down. Man, they're a really cool band, cool bunch of guys.
Great guys. Yeah, great guys, great band. My friend Casey Wasner produces. He produced most of the record, and another fellow worked on some other stuff. But Casey's the guy, and he's the guy who I have been mentoring along the way too. So yeah, I really like this band, and I like the guys. They're rock stars,
So are you guys working on a new record?
Yeah, there's a new record in the works. They went down to Fame. Cool. They cut some stuff.
Yeah.
And that's about part of the record. And then there's more songs that are being written. And they went out on the road and opened for Slash in Europe. And Slash, his band with Miles Kennedy, they fell in love with Bishop Gunn. And so they're going to bring them back to Europe. And so these guys are writing new music, and we're kind of in the process of doing that. And then there's a blues, kind of a blues jam band singer songwriter. Her name's Katie Skene, Skene, from Tallahassee, and she's got a band called Katie and the California Kind. And her band is like a bunch of older guys that are jam banders or rock, and like guys from the history of rock, like Pete Sears played with Jefferson Starship, and also
cool.
Faces. He's the bass player. Mm-hmm. My buddy John Molo was the original drummer in Bruce Hornsby, but he plays in a lot of the jam band world with Chris Robinson, and he's in Phil Lesch's band with Warren and Jimmy Herring, and plays. He's all over the place. A tall, bald drummer. So Molo, and then the guitar player is a guy named Barry Sless, who is sort of plays pedal steel and guitar a lot like Jerry Garcia. And then the other keyboard player is a guy named Rob Baracca, who has a band called Dark Star Orchestra. So those guys are her band, and she is the writer, writes these songs, and she's sort of cut from the Bonnie Raitt, Susan Tedeschi, singer, slide guitar player. She's in her early 20s, and she went to USC out here, came out from Tallahassee, and I was turned on to her. So we're finishing off her record right now, like her first, release that we'll figure out independently where to put it. And but it's a cool project because the musicians are super deep, and she's like kind of fronting the band, and it's an interesting project because I'm sure she will eventually maybe John the drummer, John Molo, has been, and myself have been mentoring her. And so I'm sure she'll find people her age to play with, but she's been like going out and playing solo shows recently with the guy who's the Grateful Dead roadie guy named Steve Parrish. And they've been doing all these Sirius radio all over and doing shows where she'll play and then he'll talk. And then she's going to go out on this Dead and Friends and play a private set in like the VIP lounge herself. And So a lot of great opportunities for this girl that have been all kind of teed up by John and myself, Molo, MOLO. So, it's fun to have these different projects. And then lastly, about just what I'm doing, I'm going to be mixing the 50-year Poco Deliverin' record that we recorded, the Troubadour, which was like their iconic record with, Better Think Twice and, those Poco songs. So we went to the Troubadour and recorded it live in November, and Richie Fure's been tweaking a few things, and then we'll mix it. So I'll got to get into that sometime soon. Oh, that's cool. Kind of like right now. That's
Well, that's a lot of different stuff. I mean, that's awesome though. But one thread that seems to be kind of where you're in your lane a little bit is excellent guitar tones and things like that. You tend to work with a lot of great guitar players. So would you kind of talk a little bit about, what your philosophy is on recording guitar, maybe not necessarily techniques, but working with guitar players specifically?
Well, it's definitely all source driven for me. Understanding the instrument is key. I don't think you can make a record. I mean, I've made great records with one instrument, but in general, guitar players, it comes from their hands, and then it comes from the instrument, and then, it comes from the amplifier. The whole thing is like each individual component. And so I think you got to understand what you're doing to get, once you get into it. And being a guitar player and also being a guitar tech, which really helped me, probably was really a crucial part of my life, was being a tech. Roadie is what we called it back then. Now it's all like, you're a tech. Oh, I was a freaking roadie, dude.
Been there, done that.
Roadies,
yeah.
Techs now, they just set up the gear. They didn't drive the truck. They didn't have to, pardon me, they didn't have to go score the band drugs or procure women out in the crowd or, I'm just being honest, we did it all. We did it all. And so as a roadie, there was a creed, the creed of the road, or the code of the road, but the creed of the road. And I'll give that to you in a second. But anyway, going back to guitars, I think you got to understand you got to understand what you're doing, and understand the instrument. And so I mean, if you're doing, whether it's a Tele or a Strat or a 335 or a hollow body or a PRS or a, Eddie Van Halen so the source is key. And I think that's often overlooked by a lot of people. They get all caught up in their mic pre and their compressor and all the gear things and plugins and amp plugins and all the modeling and all that stuff. And you can get really caught up in the world as an engineer. But since I really believe in it all being source driven, and then the source coming from the understanding of what you're doing, like, why are we doing this? Is this a big low tuned heavy metal sound? Well, that's never going to translate through a little 112, but on the flip side of it, that 112 speaker in a deluxe or a Vibrolux or a Princeton or in 10s and 12s in combo amps, really focused, AC 30s. And so understanding the gear, actually understanding it, not just like thinking it's cool, is very much a big part of my mindset. And then I don't really change much of my actual recording technique as much as the source. because I'm a big fan of Royer microphones, just end of story. I mean, that goes to, I tell this story pretty consistently, but when we were doing guitars for rock records in the 80s, I got turned on to, and heavy metal, I don't know if you call Motley Crue, I just call it, call it heavy metal if you like, but, doing rock records in the 80s, I was a big fan of ribbon mics, and I was just consistently blowing up RCA 44s and 77s and realized I could never put a Coles too close. That would go too quickly. But when you did get it to a place where it wouldn't blow up, it just sounded so good. Ribbon mics, because of the way they work, and they work similarly to our eardrum, the tympanic membrane in our ear, moves to the sound pressure level. And a ribbon microphone does that more like the human ear than any other microphone. The sensitivity of tube and condensers, they have more high end, they're way more sensitive, but they don't hear sound as similarly to the ear. So I find that when I stick a figure 8 microphone in front of a guitar amp, it gives me more of the way it sounds out in the room when I'm listening to it, and translates better out of the speakers. And with the work we did with Royer, to not be able to blow up, like I've never blown a Royer 121 or 122 or 122V, which is the tube powered. I've never blown them up in front of an amp. I just never have. You can blow it up by putting it through a patch bay and having it see phantom power momentarily and snap the ribbon. But I've literally never blown up a ribbon in front of an amp. It's made for that sound pressure level. So I find that, the mixture between a Royer and some other microphone, whether it's a 57 or whether it's a blend between a 57, a 421 and a Royer, or a Royer and a Mojave, there's many different ways, but I find that the Royer is always in place. And then I blend them down to one. I don't separate them out on separate tracks. I think that's bogus. People that do that, it's like, I got to commit the sound that I'm hearing right then in the track and start building my house. And that's my concept on guitars is get it right at the source, have the player feel comfortable with what they're playing, so it feels like, when they're playing the song, it's responding. You can never do that without having them out in the room. You got to get in front of it. You got to have them move air in front of you to see what it's actually doing. If you're just sitting in the chair and, you have no idea what the room is doing, so you got to get up off your ass and go walk out in the room and see.
Amen to that. Amen.
So, and this goes back to the creed of the road, the roadie's creed. This was, back in the day, those of us who drove trucks and did all this work and did everything we could to be of service to the musicians we work for. It goes, we the willing, led by the unknowing, are doing the impossible for the ungrateful. We've done so much with so little for so long that we're now qualified to do anything with absolutely nothing at all.
Yep.
So I learned that early on. People aren't going to thank you. You got to get your thank yous somewhere else. And when they are grateful and they say thank you, you can put that in the bank, because, most often you can't tell someone to be grateful and have gratitude. You got to be grateful yourself to have such a, the quality of life I get to live making music. Holy cow, I'm not carrying bricks or shingles up on a roof or something. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, yeah, I think though, I only went full time with music in November of 2018, but I've been side hustling this thing pretty heavily I've had my studio here for over 10 years, and I've been doing audio and music for much longer than that. I think the tenacity and the willingness to work harder than anyone and longer hours than anyone, and just learn what you've got to learn when you can to get the job done. I think there's no substitute for that. That, and like being a guitar tech, I did a little bit of repair when I worked in a music shop that I was talking about earlier, kind of minor stuff. I didn't like set necks or do refret jobs or anything, but, basic, set intonation and stuff. But, man, somebody hands you their guitar player, because I are one, I'm a guitarist, and we have our egos. We have our instruments that are kind of an extension of ourself. You know, guitar players, we're weird. We're a weird bunch. It doesn't matter if it's a $50 guitar or a $5,000 guitar. It's something, it means something special to us. So there's a massive amount of trust that if you're working on somebody's instrument or looking after it, you're the tech, especially on the road, they've got to be able to rely on it, and they've got to be able to rely on you.
Yeah. Is there a question in that? I just agree.
No. I mean, I was just saying it was kind of like, not really a question. I was just kind of reiterating a little bit what you were making me think, is it's like, there's no substitute for work or for people trusting you.
No, you got to gain the trust too. You know, that's where trust is earned. You know, trust is definitely earned.
Yeah. Well, man, let me ask you if it's cool. A couple projects I looked up on just all credits and all that stuff on just Google search. I didn't realize you worked on Girls for Motley Crue.
Yeah, I did.
You have any story you'd like to tell about that? Because that's some powerhouse drums and stuff too, not to mention an iconic rocking song.
Well, the drums were recorded at a studio called One on One, which is where Metallica also did the Black record. It's a really cool studio that I think still exists, and it's owned by, I think, the Japanese guy's got a band called X Japan, a guy named Yoshiki, who's got a ton of money and bought the thing. And no one's really worked there, you know, for years. He keeps it private, but it's a really cool room. And we did this thing back then that was one of those things we were doing when we got to this point where, to make the room more explosive, we would bring a PA into the room, and we would send certain elements of the drum kit into the PA to make the room explode more, like a little bit of kick, a little bit of like toms and snare, and they would, you know, you'd feed a little bit of that into the room and it'd explode. We used to do that at the Complex with their PA down there too. And then the project went out to Rumbo, which was my home base, and we did all the guitars and like most all the overdubs done at Rumbo. And that's where I was blowing up ribbon mics on a bi-weekly basis and getting to be really good friends with the guy in New Jersey, just sending mics back. And we used this room that wasn't used for recording. It was a rehearsal space that the Rumba was owned by the Captain and Tennille. And so Daryl Dragon, who passed away recently this year, the captain of the Captain and Tennille, had this space that he used for his keyboards, and it was like this little studio space, but it was a big room, and he stored stuff in there. And being a staff guy out there, I said to Daryl, I'd really like to put the guitars in here and get a much liver, more exciting guitar sound. And you won't be able to use your room for, you know, a couple of months, but if you're okay with that. So he was cool with that. And then the record was mixed down at Conway. The co-producer, engineer on that, this guy named Dwayne Barron, who's still a really dear friend of mine. Tom Werman, the iconic producer from like Aerosmith and a bunch of records. So it was Tom and Dwayne, and then myself, and then another engineer at Conway, Richard McKernan. And I think Toby Wright might have had something to do with that at One on One. But yeah, that was a lot of fun that year. 86, I guess. The 80s, I've been, you know, if you just give yourself up to the work, you stay busy. So yeah, that Girls was cool. And I mean, stories, I don't know, the stories are, you know, the movie that came out was a little disconcerting because, you know, I know that it's hard to make a movie that doesn't come off cheesy when you're a band like Motley Crue that did some really crazy shit. But in the studio workplace, Nikki and Tommy, you know, Mick, really hardworking. Like, I mean, yeah, Mick would like a TV screen set up between the speakers and he'd have porno going 24/7. It was a little weird for me because I'm not really a porno guy, to be honest. I've been married to the same girl since 1986, and
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, my wife Chris. We, fell in love at first sight. She put up with my shit, and then finally demanded I get, make her like legitimate, or she was going to bail. And so I married her in between making the REM record in 1986 when I was doing that in Indiana. We had made Scarecrow and did that studio for John, and then the band went on the road after Scarecrow, and then Don Gaiman and I went in and did REM/Rich Pageant. So in between recording that, I came home and got married in May of '86. So I, been married a little bit, and then we do this Girls, 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 and the guys are all they're, that Tommy was with Heather, and that it's just the really good. I mean, I can't say that I really know Vince very well because he had killed Razzle and that whole everyone. It's all history. And he wasn't around much because the band didn't really get along with him that much at the time. And Nicky would write all the songs basically, or co-write, and so he'd have Vince come in and sing exactly what he wanted to sing. And Nicky was always the driving force of the band. Tommy's just the greatest guy. He's got a studio out near me here in Calabasas, and I've used it on and off on occasion. And Tommy's just one of the coolest dudes, man. He's just he's the word rad. If you looked up the word rad, you'd find Tommy's face, and he'd be saying rad. That's rad, And then Mick, who was a lot older than those guys, and his back and everything was already hurting him, and he'd just get him, he'd sit in the chair and he'd do his guitars really relentlessly, and he'd have porno going 24/7. But hardworking guys. And then we'd get on our motorcycles after the sessions, and I was still hanging out in strip joints then. Of course, that's part of the deal. And coming home, and my wife would be like, "Where you been?" And I'd be like, "I was with the band at the strip joint." She's like, "How's that working for you?"
Yeah. My wife would have punched me in the face.
Well, well,
it would have hurt. It would have hurt too. She does karate.
Yeah. My wife doesn't put up with any shit, and so I've learned that if I want to, if I want to keep I got to keep my side of the street clean to keep my house in order here, So
I'm blessed with a great wife too, man. I definitely married up, man. It's one of those things that it's not an audio related thing, but to have that support and kicking the pants to get your crap together is worth a lot, man.
That's crucial. I mean,
it is.
I live a very simple, serene life in my life amongst the insanity. I mean. That's just really I gotta have peace on a daily basis.
Well, man, listening to not to interrupt you, I'm sorry, but listen, I think it was your Lid Shaw interview, and you spoke about how valuing time off with your kids and things like with your family and not just being at the studio 24/7 and all of that, and you're trying to build a name for yourself like me, young in the game, so to speak, even though I've been doing it a while. Man, it's hard to know when to say, I'm going home. And I admired a lot of the things that you said in that interview when you were just like, you know what? I'm not going to miss a trip to the beach or something like that.
Yeah. Well, it's crucial. I'll just say something for all the, fathers or mothers out there that are hardworking, and think that, they're doing the right thing for their family. If you have a kid, you're only going to get maybe 10, if not 12, probably won't even get 12 Halloweens with that kid before they just don't, like the first Halloween, they don't remember. The second one, they're lucky if they remember. So it's probably the second or third Halloween. And so if you're in the studio on a Halloween, the perspective I give is look back and think about 10 days of your life. 10 days go, I mean, 10 days is like I just blew my nose and 10 days go by, or I just blinked my eye and 10 days go by. But imagine you're in the studio and someone says, hey, we're working on Halloween. And you go, okay, sure. You're giving up one of the most crucial 10 days of life with your child, because the magic that a kid is inside of on a Halloween, where they get to go pretend to be someone else, walk around and get candy for the night, and do Halloween, is, if you're, if I don't, it's not about the sugar, it's not about, it's just about the magic.
Right.
And, if you tell me that there's no magic in Halloween for a kid, I think you've probably had a really, really, probably you grew up really, somewhere really harsh, and I feel sorry. But you know what I'm saying, though,
Yeah, exactly, man. You're spitting some truth, man. And that stings a little, to be honest.
Yeah. So if you give up one of those Halloweens, if you give up a Thanksgiving, or if you give up Christmas morning, or you give up, if I'm on the road, like I was out on the road when my one son, Brady, I was out busy. I was in Australia. I missed his first birthday. Now, that wasn't as much for him as for me, though. Now, I missed his first birthday. He doesn't remember it, but I do. And when I just know that I said to the wife after that, I'm never going to miss one of these early birthdays, one of the ones that really matter, because it comes a time when it more than doesn't matter. They don't want you part of it, and it's nothing personal. We're just parents.
Right.
I mean, I don't know any kid that wants their parents hanging out when they're turning 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. Maybe when they're turning a little older, but it comes a point where you got to accept that they're truly out on their own, and you can't meddle in their lives. But when they're little and young, and you're watching this, that window of life go by, and that generally leads to an understanding of what's important. So if you make everybody else more important than yourself, you tend to live life like that. And it's real hard to be happy if you're trying to make everybody else happy, but you're not happy.
Well, it's hard to get out of that hole too.
Yeah. So
you've already set an expectation.
Yeah. Like I often, people I know dig a hole in their life. They dig a hole and then they decorate it.
Wow. Yeah, that's some truth there. Yeah, I mean, and I have been guilty of that. I've done it.
Me too. I'm speaking truth. I'm not, calling I'm calling myself out.
Well, and it's been real recent for me too, because I had 4 jobs, including the studio at one point, and I was sleeping. The most sleep I could ever get in a night was about 4 hours.
And you got to do that. You got to do that sometimes,
Well, you do, but my work in the studio actually suffered because I felt dull. My mixes sounded dull.
Yeah. Okay.
So
well, I get that.
I wasn't always on my A game, and I had basically became a slave to my schedule. I was like, ooh, blank space. I should fill that with something. Not thinking, oh, I should fill that with sleep or time with the wife and the kids,
Yeah, well, it's an important part of my life, and has been for a long time. Is a balance, trying to keep balance.
Yeah, and I admire that about you, because you're very vocal about that, and I think we need more people in our industry to be vocal about that, because it feels there's kind of this idea of chasing a crazy dream, like music, for instance. You've always got to be burning the candle at both ends and the midnight oil, or you're not ever going to get there, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there is no there. We could go on and on about that.
Right.
I mean, if you don't live in some sense of gratitude on every day, then your perspective tends to be skewed, because truly, and I get, and I am a very spiritual being. I live a very spiritual life. I'm not talking about, I'm not specifically talking about, Christianity or, whatever religion you are. I'm not speaking for or some, jumping on to that. I'm just saying I do live a very God-based life, very spiritual life. And if I don't wake up in the morning and check in and know that, I can be in the care of God on every given day of my life, and that allows me to be truly human and, but keep myself in check, and I'm grateful for that, and gratitude is a word that I live with sort of tattooed inside my eyeballs. When I blink, I see it, so I try to stay grateful because, we can all be, someone else can, envy is a real shitty, it's, one of the terrible things about our business. Everybody's always doing better because we live in this world of social media now, where all you see is only the good stuff. And I post on social media too, because I am grateful. I get to be like, holy crap, I got to record Joe Bonamassa shredding today. And I'm not doing that to show you that I'm better than you. And if that's where someone takes it, I would stop doing it. Because if I made you or anyone feel bad, I can't make you feel bad. You can only make yourself feel bad. But I do not post my food and that kind of stuff on there because I think that's silly. It's meaningless. It's like, I don't put selfies of shit up there. It's just sort of like, look at me. I think that's bananas. And I think it's narcissistic and self-centered. I do like posting some stuff when I get like, holy shit, this is blowing my mind. I got to take a piece of video and show people that this is cool. It's just because I'm sort of with my mouth open too, so. Well,
yeah. I mean, cause it's like the point of Arrival is like, you've won Grammys and you've, had that. And I mean, like the first time I had a song cut, I mean, I was like, wow, that didn't feel like I thought it would. It was like, 10 years prior, I would not have anticipated it just being like, oh, well, that was cool. But yeah. I mean, the gratitude aspect of things, I actually have like my alarm in the morning on my phone. It says studio grateful in all caps. That way, the first word I see in the morning is grateful.
Well, me too. We're in the same, we live in the same world than you and I for sure. Cause
well, I have to shut off the default setting of negativity because it's annoying and it's easy to get into that, especially like social media. If you turn on Facebook and you see some crap about politics or something, it's just like, that's not the first thing I need to do in the day. Well,
that's why I say again, envy is really dangerous. Comparison
it is dangerous,
really dangerous because we live in a very everybody's envying everyone's like comparing, our lives against someone else. It's like, more. Someone's got more, someone's got less, and I'm doing better. Or they're doing better. It's like, you got to be grateful for right where you're at right now. And that's not always, I mean, damn, it's not always easy. I mean, I lost a brother and shit happens in your life, but you got to just take it as it comes. So you have to, like, for me, that's where, I do make choices based in how it's going to affect my life. I don't know the future, but I can certainly tell when I meet somebody, they could be the most killer musician, but they're like, I just don't vibe with them and I just don't resonate with them. And I think to myself, I won't be able to make the best work with this person because I really I'm not feeling it. And, they should be with someone that's feeling them.
Yeah.
And that's what's really great about this project with Edgar. Edgar and I have we made a record 10 years ago and he gave me some of the most kindest words at the time. He really enjoyed working with me and that made me feel really good. And then we hadn't worked, and he showed up in my phone calling me last summer. Hey, I want to make this record. And man, have we gotten so close and we're just like not really even that far into the record. And I just feel really close to him and really enjoy his wisdom, his knowledge, his brilliance, his humor. And he also allows me to like put my hand on him and like basically say, shut up, dude. Like, cause he can talk a lot. And in the studio, that's sometimes the kiss of death. And so the mutual trust, it's like, it's really fun. And it's not like, it isn't challenging to try to sometimes get someone's vision out of the speakers. But, that's kind of part of the whole deal is that it's not always easy. And it isn't
those kind of relationships are extremely valuable too. I'm blessed and lucky, however you want to look at it, I think I'm blessed to have a few of those people in my life that will tell me, hey dude, shut up. Or, people that I can turn around and say, dude, let's push record, man. We're going to be talking for another 30 minutes,
Well, one of the most important rules in the studio is to know when to say something and know when not to say something.
Right.
Keep your mouth shut, know when to listen, know
reading the room.
Yeah, and then also to be able to say what you mean and not say it mean, because
also in less words too.
If people may often hear things you can't, but you have control over how it comes out of your mouth. So how we phrase what we say, how we say it, when we say it, that's a learning process, and all part
psychology. A lot of that involved.
Yeah, I'm more of that than just about anything. I mean, I know a lot of guys that are just great at what they do, and they don't know what they do, but they're great at it.
Yeah, I've often wondered if I should have majored in psychology and minored in audio.
Well, you probably already are.
Right. Thanks again to Ross Hogarth for joining us from Los Angeles to Muscle Shoals via Skype. This was our first experience conducting an interview for the podcast using Skype, and I think it went pretty well. As I'm sure you've noticed, Dan was not with us for the interview process with Ross, but he did help me with some testing of Skype just to make sure everything was going to work properly before Ross and I made the connection to actually start the interview. So thanks to Dan. And as always, please give us a rating and a review. Tell us what you think. Tell your friends. For those of you that already have, a special thanks to you. You can follow us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Also, we are streaming on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, SoundCloud, etc. And thanks again. Stick around for part 2. You will not be disappointed. Stay groovy.